just arrived in the mail from MMP. Operational Matters, Volume 2. This is MMP's magazine about the OCS system, and there's a lot of good stuff in here. This is out right now. You can get it at MMP's website. I pre-ordered it, and I pre-ordered it for a very good reason, because it comes with a game, as you can see here, Luzon, OCS game. Only the second OCS game that takes place in the Pacific Theater of World War II. And there's a lot of really interesting, unique things about it, which we will see. But comes with goodies, the magazine, as most wargame magazines do. Here we have a little sheet about everything that comes in the package. Here we have half a counter sheet for Luzon. You can see the Japanese in yellow. We've got some Americans here in various colors, some airstrips, and all the markers that you will need to play OCS Luzon. Now, as you can see, this is a very small number of counters. And it's, what is it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, almost, 5 rows and some change of units, so we're not talking about a very dense game here. And we've also got some cardstock. I think one of the coolest pieces of this package is the cardstock rules references for OCS. These are going to be able to be used with any OCS game. And they detail, they're essentially player aids for the entire system. So things like trace supply, what a detrainable hex is, how you eat off the map, which units never need supply, a nice flow chart here for are you in trace supply, which is kind of nice. We've got supply concept, so this is like what a supply path is, some visual examples. I think this is a really, really smart thing. This issue of the magazine in general is actually, I guess, made for, it's sort of like a OCS starter kit. So if you've been wanting to know and learn about OCS, and you've been on the fence and you haven't really wanted to commit to one of the larger games, I think this is a fantastic place to start learning the system. There's an amazing toolbox here to learn the concepts and rules of OCS in a really easy to digestible fashion. And what's cool about these rules cards is that you can have these with any OCS game for any new player that you're playing with, or if you just need a reminder yourself. I know that I fully plan to have these with me whenever I play OCS, for just the ability to reference this stuff without having to flip through the rule book. Here's all the different types of air missions you can run, whether you have to take flak for them, who they can target, when you can do it, and some notes on them. This is invaluable. The only place this exists is in the rule book section for this, so you kind of have to be really familiar with the rules already in order to know how to look up stuff you need to find more information for. So the fact that there is a card here that gives you just a quick summary of how you run air missions, what air combat is like, what the ratings on the counters are, all of that is really, really smart. Here we've got one for transport. Different types of transport missions. This was actually, I think, for me, one of the most important ones, because I can never remember a lot of the extra rules around air transport and airdrops, because it's certain stacking points, it takes up half the stacking points if their movement value on their move side is a certain amount or less. So just having this little chart to show you how much stuff you can carry is in any given transport mission is actually super useful. Here is on the back the different aircraft types that can transport different regimental equivalents, basically, and sort of a summary there. Trucks, organic trucks for pre-existing formations, landing craft. This will be especially useful in Sicily if you're playing, which coincidentally, Operational Matters Volume 1 came with Sicily 2 5 or 6 years ago, I think. And then here it tells you how much, in a transport mission, how much they, units take up based on their movement factors. So this is just all in all a really great idea. I love that they put this together. OCS key definition reference card. What are attack capable units? Again, another question that comes up a lot. The different types of movement values, the effects of anti-tank units, and when you're doing armor combat, who's got the heaviest tank effects. On the back here, we've got the different modes for units that they can be in and sort of what those modes mean. I would bet that you could learn the entire OCS system off just these cards once you understand the sequence of play. Here's a bunch of more supply stuff, supply extenders for games that have them, more stuff on organic trucks. Multi-unit formations, that's really cool. And here's a visual example of a supply network, which I think this is great because when you're playing an OCS game, it is really, really important to get your supply network up and running as quickly as possible to be really efficient with your turns. It's the only way to make good aggressive progress, especially as an attacker in OCS. So this shows you the Smolensk game and what a supply network might look like in Smolensk, given the wide area that you need to cover as the Germans in that game as you're trying to attack the Soviets. So this is super, super invaluable for someone looking to take the next step in their OCS gameplay. Here we've got more supply stuff, combat supply, and fuel supply, when you need it, how you use it. Yeah, this is fantastic. Just like really summarizing the rules. And then finally, here we have the map for Luzon. We're going to get to that in a moment because that goes with the counters. But this, we have the magazine. So I just wanted to go through the magazine here real quick to show you what's in here. So we've got an example of play for Luzon. We have got... it's actually pretty detailed if you're looking at it. I'm curious to see how Luzon actually plays because given the density of counters and the short gameplay time, I think that it will be a really good way to get the basics of OCS down for people who are brand new to the system. We've got a strategy article from Tony Zabarachuk. I'm gonna guess that's how you say that. Apologies if it's not. OCS strategy. Here's Tony's top 12 tactical tips for OCS. Things like, expect the AO1 result, which is important. That, you're usually, basically what that means is like, you're probably going to have to sacrifice a unit offensively when you attack. The old 3-to-1 Clausewitzian philosophy there. Use all your tools, just tips how to be better at OCS. Here is the Luzon game-specific rules. So the game is about the Japanese invasion of the Philippines in December of 1941 through January 7th, 1942. It's a 2-week campaign, essentially, which is 5 turns in OCS time. It's a Japanese designer. It's designed by Matsura Yutaka, as you can see here. I believe he's a first-time designer. What's interesting about OCS is that they have a pretty dedicated Japanese community over there. They really like the system, and this is, I think, the first OCS game to come out of a non-Western designer, if I'm not mistaken. And again, it's other than Burma, it's the only one tackling the Pacific theater in World War II, which is kind of cool. It's only the second time we're getting Japanese units. So here are the special rules for the game. Some very, very short, so basically 2 pages, and we've got a page of Japanese special rules and U.S.-Philippine special rules together. So not a lot of special rules here looking like. OCS is known for having a huge range of optional rules that you can use with any of the games. A lot of the times, the individual games will say, hey, we recommend these particular optional rules. So you can see here that this is what they would recommend. So things like supply caches, don't use those. Long-range air, reactive artillery. So I'm not familiar with what those are. I'd have to go look in the system rulebook, but as you can see, you could play with them if you wanted to. There's some options for how you can favor the Japanese player, options favoring the Allied player, and then here's the victory conditions, and then here's the setup. Obviously, there's only one scenario here, I believe, because it is such a short. It's 5 turns, so you could probably play 5 turns of OCS in maybe an hour and a half if you're good at it. And here's the setup, special scenario rules. It looks like a lot, but each of these is just 1 unit. And the map actually has holding boxes for and a setup sheet here, which is a really nice touch. So you just, get all your units out, put them on the map, and then you can set up according to this chart. You don't even need to use this book, which I find that MMP and the gamers sort of like set up lists from the modern games don't have it, but a lot of the sort of like games that are like 6, 7, 8 or years or more older, you have to set up via this. Having just played a couple of SCS games where you had to use this, it makes setup really slow, so I'm glad that they're moving away from that. Some designer notes and historical commentary. Wow, lots of historical commentary. If you are interested in Luzon in the Philippines, there's quite a bit of historical material here for you to read through, which is cool. And here's a bibliography that the designer used in designing the game, which is kind of cool. Best OCS scenarios for beginners. So this is going to be an article about if you're trying to learn OCS, where to start. So here, Sicily 2, this is by the designer of Luzon, Matsura Yutaka. He thinks that Sicily 2's western half scenario is a great place to learn. I would agree with him there, not a ton. If you go back and watch my Sicily 2 playthrough, you know that most of the action happens on this half of the map, and this half of the map is a really pretty sparse engagement territory. Korea, which I have not played, he recommends a scenario out of there. He recommends a scenario out of Hungarian Rhapsody. The 3-turn scenario out of that. Again, that's an OCS game I have not yet played. Tunisia 2. This is the one that I go to. Yeah, the Race for Tunis scenario. So this is a 14-turn scenario. It's basically kind of the first half of the campaign using only the northern map here. I did play Tunisia 2, the first half of it at a convention a couple years ago as sort of a learn to play OCS, drop in, drop out, where I played the Americans, the Allies, and had everyone else drop in as the Germans. And it was a lot of fun. And yeah, I would agree. I think Tunisia, as far as like the big OCS games go, Tunisia is the one that I always recommend for players trying to learn it, because it layers in the rules really nicely. The beginning of the game, you have so few units, and a lot of the chrome for OCS doesn't show up. It shows up in steps as the turns go along. So I do like Tunisia as a learning tool for the system. Smolensk, the one of the scenarios in there, he says is good, and then Burma, the learning scenario. So some pretty good resources here for people who want to learn OCS. I really like that the theme of this magazine is, you want to play OCS, let us help you do that. Common beginner mistakes. It's really easy to screw yourself in OCS, so learning how to play well. Yeah, this is one I find ignoring facility barrages on ports and air bases is a big one that people, at least I personally tend to forget. And it wasn't until I played Sicily where barraging ports was so important that I learned the power of that. Yeah, transport aircraft needing escorts and what have you. Tactical mistakes. So a lot of good resources in here. A lot of visual documentation of some of situations. This, yeah, looks like maybe Smolensk or something else. Okay, here's the combat results table and explanation of how to read the CRT. Understanding that the CRT is pretty gradual in this game is... I think one of the things that helped me unlock my play was that, like, there's not really a huge difference between a 3-to-1 and a 4-to-1 attack, and then the gradation of results is not as big as you would think between columns. So, like, you know, you really need huge overwhelming force. If you look here at like a 13-to-1 to really to really feel like a step up from something like a 7-to-1 or a 5-to-1. So it's an article kind of explaining that and giving you some examples about how the combat results might affect your decision making, which is really cool. I just think this is a really smart, well put together magazine from the OCS community and professional staff, we'll call it. Fog of War, an article about Fog of War by Chip Saltzman. Himself an accomplished designer and developer. This is talking, I think, about how you're not allowed to look at the anything beyond the top unit of a stack, and how you can maybe hide some of your firepower beneath using the Fog of War of the game. This is something that's really unique to OCS and SCS, in my view, is that you're not allowed to look at stacks, and there's so much variability in what can happen in the combats, given the surprise function in OCS, that it really makes for... an imperfect, you can't solve the game really. You know, it's all, if you're a good logistics player, you'll typically be better than the other player, but you can have things go against you even when you weren't expecting them. I'll look at all the markers and such. Here's what looks to be counter hell. Yeah, so he's talking about how you can, like, you know, if stacks are like not neatly kept, you might be able to get a sense of what is underneath some of these, right? So he's talking about, like, if you look at your opponent's stack to see how many units there are, is it possible that one of those is actually a strategic mode marker? If your opponent's leaving the stacks kind of messy, you might be able to get some intel about, you know, what they're doing under there. So this is from Third Winter, which is kind of interesting. He talks about keeping 2 SP as 1 T markers. So that it looks like a huge stack, but you're not allowed to do that, or you shouldn't do that. And then at the end here, we've got the most overlooked OCS rules, which is a nice little rules reminder about stuff that's like people tend to forget about. And it's just weird stuff about the system too, which is kind of cool. This would be a good refresher for anyone who knows the system, as just a good reminder. So that is the magazine, Operational Matters, Volume 2. Comes with Luzon. Let's take a look at Luzon, the map. I just want to check that out. So here is the map for Luzon. It is a full-sized 24 by 32 or 22 by 34 map showing the Bataan Peninsula, Manila, Philippines, going north. And as you can see, the Japanese forces will be landing here in the north. We'll get some turn 2 reinforcements. They're going to be coming down these roads, and there's going to be American and Philippine garrisons between them and Manila. The goal of the Allies to try and get tactically retreat and get out of there. Here we can see, not very many Allied reinforcements, some supply coming in and maybe one unit, but it's going to be basically the Japanese versus this. What I find interesting, and I'll try and show you here by punching a counter, if I can, is the size of the hexes on this map are actually quite a bit larger than other OCS games. So here is a Japanese headquarters unit, fits very comfortably inside that hex. So you won't be bumping counters and whatnot. This will be very playable. Now, the one question that I do have about this is, obviously, people are going to point to this as, this is the starter OCS game. You want to learn how to play OCS, you should start with this. And while I do think that that will be true, I am also curious if there is enough going on in this game to really understand how all the tools at your disposal in OCS allow you to use the system to play it. That's one of the criticisms leveled at Reluctant Enemies, which was, yes, it was one map. Yes, it was low density, but like you didn't have some of the system's key stuff that you find like on the East Front. Now, personally, that didn't bother me. I think Reluctant Enemies is a great way for me to learn the system. But I can kind of see what people are saying, because as I graduated to some of the bigger games, there are a lot of new concepts I didn't have to deal with in Reluctant Enemies. And so I'm very curious how that comes into play in Luzon, given the small number of units that we've got in the game, and whether or not, players will be able to feel like they have a toolbox at their disposal. Now, that being said, a 5-turn OCS game with this many counters, I think, is a great way to demo OCS. If you've been curious about OCS and you want to know like what's it all about, how does it work, this seems like it's going to be a great taster to learn how to play the system. And I think if that is a gateway to playing some of the bigger and more complicated OCS games, I think that's fantastic. And I can definitely see this game being used in that way quite frequently, whether it's at a game night, a convention, at a gaming club to get people interested. I know a few people actually who I would play this with in a heartbeat, who have been curious about OCS but are intimidated by its reputation and its size. So I'm very much looking forward to playing this game and seeing how it goes and seeing if the replayability is there. And teaching some people who haven't played OCS some OCS so that I can play some of my other titles with them. Anyways, that is a quick look at what comes in Operational Matters Volume 2 with Luzon. And the first OCS game to come to the Pacific Theater since 1999's Burma, and from a Japanese designer, no less. So we're going to get this to the table sometime soon, and maybe I'll have an after-action report for you.